ban one, but still looking forward to seeing these new picks.
Yeah, I mean, we see Jeff banned immediately, the Mantis banned on the opposite side, and that's kind of typical, right? Reject really valuing the Mantis. We saw how valuable it was over in the EMEA region. Things are changing, right, in terms of Ultron maybe not as much of a priority anymore, and that can dictate a lot of things. Also with Hela Namor entering with the new patch notes. I know we've mentioned it a little bit, but if you're unfamiliar with our ban phase ship, it's basically asymmetrical, right? On the opposite side, both teams can ban for the other squad, but the other team on the opposite side has 2 protects to counter the bans, right? So you have 4 bans total and 2 protects, and it happens asymmetrically. Sometimes it will sync up. You'll see at the very beginning we had the Jeff and the Mantis ban. That happens at the same time, and then it's on this ban right now where it's synced up ban-wise yet again.
Absolutely. Great call out once again. And one thing to call out here for Aconyx is they actually in the past really just allowed teams like OUG to have the Jeff. They never really valued the Jeff, but I'll tell you what, right off the rip like this, going to ban Jeff out and immediately lock it in, goes to show you they are learning. And that may be a product of picking up some new talent here coming into this tournament and changing things up. That's the kind of benefit that you can see. Obviously, there's a conversation to say that they may struggle a bit as we're going to see some different bans than what we've seen in the past here as we see Angie and Hela removed.
Yeah, both Angela and Hela getting removed. I mean, we saw the buffs as well. You see the Venom ban. We've heard people saying that's the best hero in the game. A lot of people thinking that he is incredibly good. And then the Angela and Hela bans, you talked about that new team up alongside Namor, creating those undead squids, creating his title, Dirge, right? There's so much stuff added to the game in that part. And the same thing with Angela, like Angela getting that buff in terms of getting more shields from her attacks and stuff. Like, there's so much Vanguard buffs that happened in the last patch ship, and you could see it already in the draft and the priority of keeping Captain America on the opposite side. Reject just hard trying to focus out the hero pool potentially of Team Ac.
Yeah, and Venom has that location where he can essentially just run around the center of the map and stall for days, and I think that is what they were looking for here when they're going to be banning that out and locking it in for the side of Reject. Again, Celestial Husk, our first domination, would be no different for me and Dog. We've seen Celestial Husk a whole lot, but personally a big fan. Goodbye to Emma, another favorite of mine, another incredibly strong Vanguard in the right hands who just dominates the front line and really, makes folks punish that are playing things like those Brawl heroes. All right, we are going to be heading in now, folks. Very excited again. Think about it, $1 million on the line of this tournament. The nerves at an all-time high, and I'm ready to see how these teams perform.
For sure. I mean, right now, Reject has a chance, really, to make a name for themselves in terms of the Korean region, right? They played well, I think, at the midseason. We've seen some performances that were solid out of them, and it's the same thing with OUG on the opposite side. And for Team Aconyx, right, the big thing is living up to the expectations of a lot of the Chinese fans, right? I know a lot of these guys were, excited to be here in the first place. I mean, first of all, traveling as a young man, right, or woman going over to America for the first time is a huge deal, and it's the same thing for Team Reject. A lot of them are more experienced in that regard, right? So I'm curious to see how Team Aconyx adapts to that, right? Coming to the event for the first time, coming to Atlanta, and sort of, experiencing everything for the first time in America, because that can be a big culture shift on top of the fact that you have to play a professional match in a group stage, which are only best out of 3.
Yeah, again, it's one of those things where there's so many things at play in the pro scene. It's not necessarily just how you're performing in that moment. It's how you're feeling, right? There can be plenty of issues when it comes to, whether you're just maybe not even accustomed to the food and the time zone and all that stuff comes into play and really can mess with the flow of your team and force you into a position where you're not feeling as confident on a certain map.
Yep, absolutely. You're right. And for Team Aconyx and Reject, right, we already know with Reject what they can do. Right? It's a matter of, can they actually live up to expectations of that region, right? Because there are so many. And I'd be remiss to not mention it just because of how much that region, firsthand experience, right? It's a different game entirely, but these players, right, can have access to internet cafes and stuff like that. I've mentioned to you with the new recent changes to allow even PlayStation 4 players to come and play Marvel Rivals for the first time on old gen, right? Finally getting those guys to be able to play the game. It's not always easy to access a lot of these games, right? And luckily Marvel Rivals is pretty easy to access in terms of the digital menu, right? And especially to console players who, it's one of their first instances sort of playing online games, first time playing Marvel Rivals, or even maybe it could be their first video game. So for a lot of those guys, it's very important to sort of play the game and have access to it. And Korea, I think, has an infrastructure around that with the local PC cafes. You pay a couple bucks, you can play on the computer, right? And because online, so many people have $1,000 computers, $2,000 computers. It's harder to kind of get into, Shib. And I mean, I know that you definitely talk to a lot of people that are newer to the game and stuff. What's the first thing you would tell somebody if they're coming into the game for the first time and they're like, okay, what do I do? I feel lost. What can I potentially do to get focused?
Yeah, I think the key to joining a genre like this is really understanding that is not your traditional genre. A hero shooter is a very different animal. Cooldowns are very important. Ultimate usage is very important. Fighting as a unit and not trying to 1v6, for example, is a huge learning. But just to piggyback off your initial comment too, the way you can come into this game, even using controller, mouse, and keyboard at this level of play, you will see controller folks across the board, and strategist, duelist, and vanguard up at this level of play. So it really is. There's multiple angles of attack to get into this style in this level of play even. So again, there is a ton of ways in. It's all about putting the time and the work in. I know you have a great, you've had plenty of conversations about how hard it is to get to this level, but you can absolutely do it if you're dedicated.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of dedicated players. I mean, and it doesn't matter what input you're on, and that you mentioned that before, and it's you even had the chance to talk to Dark Zero and some of the other teams that are on controller today, and you even talked to Smash. Maybe we get to see some of that stuff later on Team Dark Zero. But yeah, I mean, even for those guys, there's only 3 of them here at the tournament. We got DRP, Enzo, and Smash, and that's basically it. TTK too, 4. All 3 Vanguard and 1 Duelist. No strategist player here on controller, although there have been to play online in the EMEA region and qualifiers, and all of the players who I'm sure wanted to be here. There's a lot of very good, talented controller players, but there's not many of them. And that's kind of interesting, right? That's the fact that we can sort of see these up-and-coming prodigies. I think even Enzo, the Citadel team, did a tier list video, right? And he mentioned how it was so crazy to see Smash on a controller playing Duelist, right?
And Psylocke, too.
And Psylocke, yeah. He's on a high sense. He's like, man, that guy just must be so good to be able to play with a controller on Duelist. It's impressive for sure.
Yeah, and again, I mean, just after the conversation, a little sneak peek to what we'll be talking about as we watch Dark Zero in our next series. They're using standard controllers, claw grip, with natural sense, and that blew my mind. I was expecting paddles. I was expecting, different thumb lengths on their all the bells and whistles. Nothing. Standard controllers, claw grip, playing at this level of play. It just goes to show you really can get it done with any tools in your hands. And speaking of getting the job done with tools in your hands, we're going to head over again. The thing that I'm more shocked about, but I'm curious to maybe that's just a meta shift, is just that Aconyx got that double res through. I'm not sure it's quote-unquote meta. It is their comfort, but once again, for those who are maybe looking at this team for the first time, it is a different team, so they may not be able to run through that. Yeah, it's a completely different roster right now on their squad, and that's going to be a big deal, right? How much have guys gelled together, right? How much can, for instance, and we're already starting out, by the way, going out into the game immediately. We get the Venom through for Team Aconyx on their side, right? They prioritize a lot of those Vanguard bands onto the side of Reject. It was flipped on both sides. Right now, we'll see what happens for Team Aconyx as, they're able to kind of play that Ultron old meta style alongside the Mantis. They were able to get that for Reject, not given that same opportunity, but they do get that Jeff and the Adam Warlock through. The bands were flipped on the backside, but you get to see now Team Aconyx playing that Star-Lord composition we've seen so many times online alongside that Magneto bubble that Star-Lord in with that Blaster Barrage. Yeah, I'm personally terrified here when I'm looking at Aconyx's team comp. I mean, they've got the damage boost there with Venom available. Are you kidding me? And Ultron, who maybe taking a little bit of a backseat in the meta, but is just incredibly strong still. Is Disaster going to be moving in here forward now with that Star-Lord. Blaster Barrage going to be bubbled up to stay healthy, and that ult charge just climbs, folks. Make sure you're bubbling your Star-Lord when he's making those aggressive plays. It's worth the communication to ensure you're doing that, because that will get you ult faster than those strategists, or at least on par, so you can force out strat line cooldowns. And here is the dive off rip. Does this fine play from Cammy? I mean, right now, he's kind of getting bullied by Gargoyle, but doesn't get the final blow, and that's the thing, Shiv. Oh, eventually, Finale finally hits the shot across the map. That's what you want to see out of your Adam Warlock player. A lot of final hits in that regard. Also, Ultron's Rage over the high ground, able to take down Finale on the backside. He has that self-res, though, on that passive, but here comes that crude ult from Marvel as well, met by that Ludasnow dance floor on the backside, but it doesn't matter because they lose Egg Tart in the middle of it, and there's no res to bring him back. Yeah, and Finale's going to be right back in the fight. Gargoyle goes down there, though. It does have that Kraken impact. That's a huge win. Up we go with Meteor Rem, and down goes It's Jeff. But the timing just a little bit too early, and the Jeff going to find an eat here. Potentially off map, countered right back by the Galactic Legend. Meteor M right back at it once more, finding one here for Disaster onto Piggy. Finale, though, going to bring the res right back into Piggy.
Yeah, that's the problem playing against these Adam Warlock comps when the res is available. Right, can just bring everybody back into it. Here comes that ult from Cammy. Needs to go huge, but it's only onto Gargoyle, who is bubbled by the Magneto. Gargoyle shuts him down.
That is a huge play. Another follow-up here again, he says, as Gargoyle continues to walk forward. Piggy gonna find Kuma, and now, just like that, Reject 90% on here on point one.
And Chib, right now, it's because, I mean, they were able to get that first point cap with their overwhelming pressure of playing around this Magneto group, playing a very front-to-back style, which Aconyx could never really get a hard dive. Maybe with the changes to Ultron, and they can't even touch last second, Chib. No overtime, map done, round number 1 done between Reject and Aconyx.
Yeah, I mean, shaking off the nerves is one thing, and that is for sure, but again, Aconyx is just not quite there in terms of synergy. It looks like off this early start, not even being able to touch in that moment is a tough look. You know, it's right now, they've got to, as we talked about, shake out the nerves, but also just get through this first map, start figuring each other out as a team. They've really only got together as they've landed here in Atlanta, so they've just got to find their synergy early on in this tournament and then turn everything around, because right now, I'll tell you, Reject looks different in these battles.
Yeah, Reject is going to be tough. I mean, especially if Dobie can play that Jeff. We've seen so many great Jeff plays throughout the world, and he was just consistently available for his team alongside Finale. Finale finding these eliminations. You mentioned how Finale's a star player on Psylocke. It seems today that a lot of these players have had to pick up Adam Warlock recently, and most of them are doing it in stride, Shib. If you mentioned Delena, you know, a lot of these guys that have played nothing but a lot of duelists, like Fi, too. They've been doing very well on heroes like Adam Warlock when need be, right?
Yeah, and that makes sense, right? Warlock, a very strong hit scan, and now just essentially infinite heals if you can land your shots on the dome, because you just get that E back incredibly quickly, and if you can consistently heal, you win 1v1s, because every time you're down in a trade, you just heal yourself right back up, and then that Hela battle turns into you having full HP again while you've landed a few shots on Hela, and next thing you know, it goes to your favor. Disaster starts off here, gonna punch one, and Marvel dropping backwards. There goes a huge group hug. That's going to find one, make it 2. Why don't you? Finale going to take out Kuma and Disaster. Is there another? They're walking down now. Wall goes out to bide more time. Gargoyle onto Cammy. And goodbye, Mercury, as they continue to dominate in this battle.
Yeah, the tough part as well is that they're trying to match out this composition with Reject alongside the Bucky, playing it front-to-back style with the Mantis, but I do like that Reject didn't prioritize that Mantis. Even though she got buffs in the recent patch, it still feels like Mantis was sort of a bait in the last patch in terms of being one of the best heroes in the game. Reject, I would have figured, would want to prioritize it, but in this side, already walking up is Team Aconyx.
Yeah, and there we go. The invisible boundary countered right back as the team is dropped and countered. Full strategy is going to pop out as Bond is also matched up as necessary, as that is a huge eat with the Meteor Ram. Goodbye to the Strangling Prison there. Well played, walking forward once more. Well done, Piggy.
Huge by Piggy, and then, oh my gosh, Marvel on the backside with a massive Strangling Prison. That Meteor M doesn't eat it on the backside, comes in, but nobody's there. Everybody's peeling, in fact, for this ultimate. Rez comes through for Kovac, but I believe his ult got canceled too, so tough fight there for Aconyx as they take the wipe again to Shiv. 50% on the board for Reject, taking that point early, and then you mentioned the eat of that Meteor, of that Strangling Prison. Kama is going to go swap over to Venom now too, completely go away from that composition. You can tell Aconyx is looking for some form of solution against Reject to have looked dominant so far.
Yeah, we call this in the business panic switching, and that is when you really aren't sure, as we see again, Cammy going to be making the switch there to Captain America. So, yeah, a tricky position to be in at this current moment, but once again, you just got to see some synergy here from Aconyx, who are working to build that synergy early on. These teams have that advantage. Reject is almost going to be having 200% to nothing at the current moment of this domination.
Yeah, sitting pretty, and also forcing out that Soul Bond early from Team Aconyx, so they're sitting back with ultimates available, but without cooldowns to walk in, so there's too much pressure right now from the Jeff on the backside of the Captain America, not able to do much. Also a grab, it looks like in that fight by Gargoyle. Huge eat as well from the It's Jeff.
Oh, and that finds 2, gonna drop allies back. Goodbye to 2 strategists as Dobie make a huge play. Goodbye to Egg and Mercury. Marvel gonna find Cammy, and once again, a dicey position to be here. But, ooh, wow, immediately the whole team right back. Egg, Mercury, Kemi, and Kuma right back on point here. And they need to make a play, but the Strangling Prison goes out. Walls go behind, and goodbye again to Mercury and Egg, who cannot get away from these ults.
Yeah, they can. I mean, trying to stall it out now with the Meteor M, but it's an absolute prayer, an absolute desperation. Kuma finds one, but it's not nearly going to be enough. The Karmic Revival on top of that ship. It's done. Job done for Team Reject, at least for the first map in this best out of 3 situation, because that was an incredible map out of them. Looked flawless versus Aconyx, who, I mean, just got stalled out, ship. It was so consistent in terms of how often they just stalled out the point, right, for ultimates to come through, and you just see the freest Strangling Prisons from Marvel, who wins out the MVP, at least in terms of the in-game statistics. But it makes sense because of how much they stalled, of how well Gargoyle played on that Bucky. This is looking like a far more cohesive team than I think a lot of people maybe expected out of Korea. They're looking good, looking as dominant as this region has been before.
Yeah, I just saw a lot of overcommitment from Aconyx. For example, we saw a lot of bonds in the middle of, some of these invis ults. We've seen Stratlines double committing. It was a little bit of, you can see the lack of practice as a unit, right? And I think that is a tough thing. Again, we talked about, they have to work on that early in this tournament, and that is just inevitable at this point. But once they figure that out, maybe we see a different team. But I'll tell you what, 200% to nothing is a tough look for Aconyx. Really well done by Reject.
Yeah, and it's on domination, too. This is sort of that map type where a lot of people say, okay, you could be a little bit more brawly. You could be a little bit less team-focused, right? And, maybe they can look at that draft phase, change things up. We mention all of the time, if you're tuning in for the first time, that draft phase is incredibly important. It's because it can change, the comfortability of your individual players, but also make your enemy team uncomfortable. Sure. And we've talked to a lot of players about their strategy and stuff, but we can talk about that later, Shib. As for right now, we're going to a short break. When we come back, we'll see you for map number 2.
Ones have what it takes to become the best of the best.
The fight is going to happen right here, right now.
Welcome back, everyone, and you gotta love those graphics of Atlanta, but 1-0 so far from Reject, who looked dominant out there in that domination.
Reject looks so good. I mean, yeah, this is a team to watch out for, I think, moving forward, simply because of the fact that they can really make it work when they specifically play, it looks like these front-to-back styles, right? Yeah. This is something that we really shouted at 100 Thieves for early on in the Stage 2, and it seems like Reject have a good understanding as well.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what the quote-unquote meta is going to be from these teams over time, whether if we're going to stick to those more traditional 2-2-2 front-to-back, if we're going to be seeing that triple strat line more consistently. But, in the meantime, I'll tell you what, watching Finale and Gargoyle out there, they looked like they had no issue on those duelists, and they were running both with 7 finals there in that first map.
Yeah, Gargoyle's pretty good, man. Pretty good. And I think he said both duelists because Finale usually on the Psylocke. And, we know now Adam Warlock basically a duelist, right? So that character can just absolutely pop off. You saw what that 7 final hits, like you said. And both of those guys are phenomenal players. And we're going to get into the draft in just a bit here as we head on a Symbiotic Surface. Yet another one of these Venom symbiotic maps again, Shib.
Hey, you gotta love them. If you are a Venom fan, it is a nice little shout out here, and that's, one of the benefits to Marvel Rivals is, as a nerd myself, I love to see these worlds come to life here in Rivals. And goodbye again from Reject on that Jeff, as once more, Aconyx, they just don't seem to value getting rid of that Jeff as much, and they paid the price there as Jeff was getting some big value from Reject.
Yeah, yep, 100%. And on the opposite side, right, we get that Venom ban as well coming through once more, right, because we saw the ban protect of the Mantis, and we know how good it is in those Asia regions, in Korea as well, and I'm sure these teams are practice against each other, play against each other on a lower ping. So I imagine that's why we see that Mantis ban on the opposite side, and the Jeff priority we saw also in Stage 2, so that hasn't changed too much. And this is kind of the early stages of a lot of these teams even figuring out the patch and the meta, right? So that Jeff Ban Protect comes out. We see the Hella Protect come out. Maybe going to see some priority towards that Namor this time around. But
sure,
Aconyx doing the same stuff with the ban phase yet again, except for that Hella Protect. They look like they want to make sure Venom's not played. But you see on Reject's side, they don't have any really big holes with the fact they already played Magneto and Groot.
Yeah, I guess my curiosity right now is, are we going to see the ban out of Namor to shut that down? Is it valuable enough at this level of play to remove? And that is something that I still have yet to see, and yes, it apparently is. as we see right now, Reject removes that. Goodbye to those undead squids. That can be a menace, especially because, again, folks, for those who don't know, any assist from Hella or Namor on anyone is going to generate a squid that will fire, I believe, 3 times. I have to check, maybe 4 times, but either way, it is detrimental.
It's crazy. It's hard to play against, and Cap Protect comes out again for Reject, so they're same thing except for that Namor ban. We were kind of talking to Velocity about this behind the scenes, where we were talking about how in the stage of the regions, it felt like you could target ban specific people, right, and make sure they were uncomfortable. That's what we thought was the best idea, the best strategy.
Sure.
But they're saying, Velocity's saying at LAN, at this international event with all these phenomenal players, it's very hard to do that because not many teams have holes in their hero pool, right? And, you know, on Aconyx side, they're kind of going for desperation here, in my opinion, protecting the Hella, and on the opposite side, Emma Frost ban. But I think that keep playing this Hella is going to be big for Aconyx, right? They want to make sure that Kovac can pop off and live up to his name as an aim training god, right? And that's kind of be their big thing, right? Make sure they can allow him to pop off on Hella, as that's kind of their saving grace, because that last map, you mentioned it, we all saw it, right? That was a rough map for Aconyx, and now we have to go and do another symbiotic map where Hella maybe has that skin, right? Can maybe adapt to the map itself as Reject look to close it out, because we are in a best out of 3 here, Shib. Reject could finally close it out on Aconyx in our very first match of the day on the A stream.
Yeah, that's crazy to say. We've seen some battles here, though, in Symbiotic, so I'm curious to see if that will happen again. We just need to see Aconyx wake up a little bit, and I know they can. So this is their opportunity to show it off. As we start now, you can see Reject is going to be defending, and this is the choice from Aconyx as to where they wanted to either attack and the map and the mode. So again, this is in their favor. It will be showing up here with the Venom, and Disaster is going to be on that Psylocke. Haven't seen Psylocke yet in that first match, and nope, I lied, as there is a switch right to Bucky, but I was curious as their take on Psylocke with that improved ultimate, which can be a threat to the backline.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, and that's available. That's always something to look at. And I like these, first 20-second look at the map as we load in. You get to see the defense set up. You can see already Marvel, an incredibly smart Captain America player alongside the Jeff, just poking for damage, right? You look for you mentioned how these pros look for any small increments of, tiny micro adjustments they could do to squeeze out extra damage for ult charge Shib. And I like that you always point that out, because that's phenomenal use out of at least Jeff early on to build that ult.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you see a lot of groups set up walls off spawn and try to throw a right click in there to land, because that can get you upwards of 10-12% just before the map even starts, and that is a huge advantage. So we'll be starting now again, folks. If you haven't seen, Reject is going to be running that triple backline with a very aggressive Warlock Jeff play. Finale, I've seen some success in the past with some of these alts. Looking to make that happen once more. Marvel on that Cap as discussed. Cap takes a huge precedent in the EMEA and even across the regions, but the U.S. not as much in the Americas region.
Yeah, I think that was a priority ban. We talked to Velocities about how they just wanted to make sure Cap wasn't played, but Kovac already using the bird to fly away, right, with the extra 25 HP given in that patch and also quicker use of it. Gets back to his team, but I mean, it's so tough. Look how much target focus that he has to do, right, all over the place. But everybody falling back to build up the strategist ults on Reject's side, but they don't even need him. They already found Candle early on, and with that, Aconyx already down to tank. Now they lose another. Just collapsed on Shib. Just overall aggression from Team Reject. They just choked him out like a snake.
Yeah, I mean, and once you guys get just a shout out there, first off to the observers, but notice how that team set up. The entirety of Aconyx was in that room, and then the entirety of Reject attacked from 3 different doorways at the same time with a 3-2-1 call, and it's just mayhem for focus, again, forcing a tough struggle as to who do you prioritize in that moment, because it's so hard to get comms off when everybody's attacking at the same time. So well played by Reject, and just an unfortunate situation there for Aconyx.
Walking in right now with that Sonic's reduction as well, Shib, into that invisible boundary forced out already, and that's a trade they'll take on Reject's side, Shib, right, as you force out a huge Stratus ultimate, and they're building up towards the Ultra's Rage, but with the nerfs and with the changes coming through, we'll see if Aconyx can still come into this fight with enough aggression to win.
We're going to start off here. The Freedom Charge onto the back line, looking for one of the strats. Up we go with the Meteor M. Downtown, it does land, but really Bond was out, and that's just not going to allow a ton of damage to be spread. Well done there by Ziyaki with a great Eternal Bond, and out we go with the Rage of Ultron from Kovac, and it's matched right back with the dance floor as the Fate of Both Worlds walks the team into their backline, matched again by Egg, who's going to turn that pace right back at them. Who's going to find the value? Finale ready here with the It's Jeff, though, could be dangerous, and Gargoyle as well. Will we see the damage boost come through here? No. The It's Jeff is going to be the first choice, and that is going to find potentially a few. Great placement there from the It's Jeff, who does find one. Again, you can use it on the high ground to ensure you don't get taken out by some of these counter ultimates. Finale going to turn backwards and instead just try to force out Invis, and lost Invis with a great jump there. Well done by Mercury.
There she is, but she's bubbled again by the Magneto. This is what they were trying to do, save her early on. Mercury getting so much pocket. This is the benefit of these Ultron comps with that drone. You can keep them alive for so long, but unfortunately, they eventually lose this fight, right? Too much pressure with the Sonic Seduction. Back to the spawn they go.
Yeah, again, Reject just looks so dominant in this battle here against Aconyx. It is unbelievable how coordinated and how strong they are playing against this team. Aconyx got to find their footing here. 43 seconds on. We will see what they do. Ult advantage going to be likely or just slightly in the favor of Reject in this fight as Marvel, Gargoyle, Dobie will be close, and Izayaki will be ready. Mercury going to force out the invisible boundary. Disaster shortly there. Kovac with the Rage of Ultron. They've got to commit soon here with 27 seconds on in this fight.
They're trying to live, right? This Ultron comp, sort of front-to-back style. Now finally get that Bucky in there. Get the resets on Gargoyle's side, maybe for Disaster, but there's too much healing with both freedom charges popping. Now they get the Born again on the high ground. But can they live? Can they extend past this? They actually don't save Gargoyle. He was already rezzed, so he'll be out of the fight now. This is potentially Aconyx's turnaround point.
Yeah, it was a little bit of overcommitment there by Reject, who I think they just thought they had it in the bag. Movement there from Finale, potentially using that ult to just displace from a dangerous position. Dobie is in a dangerous spot. Again, using that team up with Adam to try to heal up. Unfortunately, just not able to make that work. As now Aconyx are up in numbers. Make that 2 as Piggy goes down from Disaster. Cammy going to walk in towards the back line and is going to keep the pace and the space. And we have 2 ticks on here. On the point here for Convergence. And now once again, Aconyx looking like a different team, and this is the pace they needed to set because it looked difficult. Once again, I think Reject just a little bit of an overextend. Point 1 to Aconyx.
Yeah, I mean, that can happen, right? Complacency, we always mention how, you know, you're holding for so long. I mean, we saw 4 minutes there out of Reject, but in the very last moment, right, Gargoyle went past, even with the overshield, still went down, and you could see Aconyx very practiced at this sort of Ultron composition. I imagine Kovac loves to play it as well, and we saw how good he was in the previous patch, even though he's been slightly tuned down, right, and also with Human Torch being nerfed, he's not maybe going to be played as much as maybe people would assume, but that was a huge fight win for Aconyx. They can turn it around here. 2 minutes in the streets phase because of that time bank, and Gargoyle's over to the Psylocke on the opposite side.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see they are going to be switching over to that 3 backline comp, and it clearly is working for them. Finale going to find Mercury. Egg goes down. Disaster and Kuma, and that was incredibly quickly. The pace right back in the side of Reject, who took that fight personally. But we do have a Kraken impact available here for Aconyx. Kovac going to be close to, and Cammy. You look over at Reject. Almost everybody will be ready for ult in this next fight.
Absolutely. And you talk about Psylocke before, how that buff came through, doing more damage in the ultimate per swipe. The Dance of the Cutterfly, as you like to call it, is so back. Never been more back, right?
It's essentially, with the damage boost, it's another swing of the ult. That's the best way to consider it and to think of it. But the burst potential of that ult enables you to essentially find some strategists with the right prioritization, and get a pick through a strat line ultimate. And up we go as Marvel is going to dive backwards. Is going to be punched away from Disaster as Gargoyle gets that pick on a 2-3. Why don't you? That is huge with that Dance of the Butterfly from Gargoyle, who is showcasing why Psylocke is still incredibly strong.
Yep, 4 in that fight from Gargoyle. Huge plays from him, and he's been doing that. Last fight, we got that first hit, or first final pick by Gargoyle at the beginning. And that's kind of something we could talk about. Like, that's a progressive thing, right? We see Adam Warlocks do that, Psylocke too. Even with the damage nerf, still does a lot in that combo. Still can find one-shots with a little bit of a dash. So, incredibly talented Psylocke right now. Let's see if Gargoyle can do it again.
Just going to farm here on Ultron in the sky. Kraken impact goes out. Piggy going to find Mercury. Going to drop back into the sky. Gargoyle with some great positioning. Playing very strong in that Psylocke. One goes down low in the back line. Is going to retreat and escape. Cammy directly on Adobe now, who has some great movement, but not for long as Disaster gets that pick. But everyone is born again as Izayaki going to bring back the team. Dobie right back in the fight. Mercury going to find Finale, who should be res right back. Piggy. And yeah, there it is as well. And Gargoyle and back in the fight as like nothing happened here. A lot of commitment there as we see the Rage of Ultron. Good patience there by Kovac, who's going to now try to find picks that will not be rezzed. And they're still keeping that momentum forward.
Wow, the healing's so good on the Gargoyle to keep him alive there last second. Here comes that Sonic Seduction. Also, committing Dobie's ult is massive if they can live this meteor end, but it's an overtime. Knowing this is going to be the last fight, they have to kind of pop ults right now on Aconyx side, but they don't have any to work with.
Yeah, and that's enough value right there. Finale can escape. 10 HP does go down. Good aim and focus, and this could be terrifying. Yes, it is. Goodbye to Egg. Mercury goes down. Kovac as well, and that should do it for the OT. What a hold here by Reject before point 2.
This is very interesting at a Reject shape, just to kind of bring us back to it, right? Reject, you mentioned how Finale was their Psylocke player before, right? And now we get to see Gargoyle play it. more focused on it at least. And then the same thing with Izzyaki on Adam Warlock, and you can see that they're adapting. They're trying to figure out this flexible game that is Marvel Rivals, because that's kind of the biggest talking point for a lot of people, is that you have to be a flexible team. And you can see Gargoyle on the side looked pretty good. It's maybe not to the level of what we saw from Finale, but we see a lot of these top duelists taking over Jeff, right? Jeff has been a big priority for Visions on the side of FlyQuest, and you can see same thing for Finale. There's so many high-level Jeff players, and you hear so much from the pro players how high skill cap that hero is, right?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more that you need to have versatility, and that's why you don't see one tricks at this level of play. It is impossible. Instead, you need to have, we talk about all the time, instead of a hero pool, you need to have a hero ocean. If you are able to be flexible with your team, you can find solutions, and finding solutions, I'll tell you what, Reject has the solution right now, as they are looking insane here against Aconyx. And at the moment, I can't decide if it's just a lack of team coordination from Aconyx, or if Reject is really just dialed in at this moment. A team that is very confident and ready to perform, as Finale going to be making that switch back to the Warlock on that attack.
Maybe a little bit of column A, maybe a little column B, right? And I think you can at least be hopeful, I imagine, for Reject fans in the current moment. For Aconyx fans, you might be a little bit worried moving forward, considering they're playing a lot of this Ultron stuff, but you got to kind of play to your strengths, right? And their strength right now is playing heavily around the sky, making sure you're enabled in the front line. Maybe the Star-Lord will help you out on the defensive side. We've seen how good that hero is, and we already seen an early Doctor Strange portal on the back line flanked from Reject. Gargoyle one-shots Egg Tart.
That's crazy. Off the rip like that through a portal, that is insane. As Egg goes down, and that's not only a pick, but that's a pick on a Luna, and that means everything in this moment on attack. That's going to buy you a ton of momentum, as Marvel now going to try to find a way into the back line. Magic getting some play for the first time in the tournament so far. Gargoyle looking towards Invis, who does escape. Now towards Cammy, who's trying to walk away, but you can't escape a Magic who is looking for blood here. Mercury going to be walking forward and holding on to the point for as long as possible, but it's mayhem in here right now. Still not getting targeted in this moment, as Finale's right next door. Egg gonna come back and find Finale, but Gargoyle gonna get that pick onto Disaster now, and Iggy holding on, but not for long, and that is a good retake here from Aconyx, who still held on with only one tick.
Yeah, a little bit of cheesy play there from Reject's side, right? Trying to go for that portal. Gargoyle finds one, but the problem with the Magic is it can run out of steam. That's why when behind the scenes we were talking to Ryan Mazing about, you know, one of the best Magic players in the game, by the way, talking about how we're probably going to see Daredevil before Magic, but no Daredevil in this match so far. Gargoyle switching back over to the Bucky. Makes a lot of sense. I think with that Magic, it just too many. We talked about it before, Shiv. The cooldown's a bit too long to make it work consistently throughout these fights, especially against these Ultron comps. Invis boundary pops by Mercury early.
I'm curious if they, held the right click on Magic there and ready for the dash on E into the front line to get that pick onto the back line, as Egg goes down again here. Gargoyle finding Egg once more early on in these fights, and that is a ton of value. Marvel going to be picking off Mercury as the back line crumbles here for Aconyx and is going to have to completely reset. Holding on for as long as possible. 2 ticks are climbing, but the res comes through here. Gargoyle going to find Kuma and still hold on to this point as it is gaining, and the touch comes in here from Cammy. He's going to have that Ultron drone to buy more time, 300 HP, but it is falling, and down goes Cammy and Disaster.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they can sustain for longer, but it's against Gargoyle with the Kraken Impact portals here too late, unfortunately, for Mercury's side. But they're fine with that, right? Wiped again. Maybe gonna get another one here as that Magneto has to run away. Can they get the reset for the Bucky? He tries to go for it, doesn't connect, but still, stagger played on a stagger play. That cart moving forward. We talked about the new map with, Heart of Heaven, with that cart moving even further. And right now, Shiv, they're already towards the end. There's no portal 2. This is gonna be a rough retouch.
Yeah, you have to fully commit here. You cannot stagger now, as you have to ensure you touch as a unit. But again, this defense is tricky on this point. You have such a long distance. You are going to need a portal, which was just unfortunately used, and they can't even touch.
Makes sense, Chip.
Reject looked so dominant in that. There's nothing else to say besides looked like the team that deserved that win and were consistently active across the board, making big plays and finding those backline picks on a strategist left and right.
Yeah, just so consistent in terms of the overall production of their entire team, right? There was so much uptime. There was a point where you could be a little bit worried, right? They kind of played into how Aconyx was trying to counter, right? Just stay alive, get a lot of healing, and just slowly pick off people with your, just target focus that is maybe sometimes lacking. But there you go. Huge game from Gargoyle again. And the rest of the squad, I mean, what's your first take there in that as we point out that Reject just won that series 2-0, man. It was very clean, except maybe one tiny mistake with Boyle on Doctor Strange, or on the Magic alongside Doctor Strange portaling.
Yeah, they're a good retake there, and it showed some promise from Egg, but again, Reject just across the board. Finale, Gargoyle, 15 finals. Finale finding 8 there on Warlock, I believe, is again, a testament to being able to be active on Warlock, get a ton of value, and have those reses. The team commits ults. Again, if you're playing Warlock and a team uses multiple ultimates to, find those picks throughout your team, if you res everyone back, that is one trade for multiple ultimates. That's always going to be valuable. It's just a matter of if you can keep the team healthy off that respawn.
Absolutely.